Well, it is April, a month that Alabama seems to have a lot of tornadoes and some historic ones as well. We, of course, just passed the anniversary of the Oak Grove tornado in 1998. That went through Jefferson County. And then I'm joined now by Meredith Carpenter, someone who went through the April 27th tornado that also took a similar path to the 98 one, went right through Pleasant Grove. So you're from Pleasant Grove,
I
correct?
am. That's where I was born and raised.
So how long were you there? I guess leading up to this event in 2011.
So I was born and lived in Pleasant Grove until I moved away to college. Went to Tuscaloosa in 2000. I did not move back there, but it was my house and my home, and my mom was there. And my experience was just from dealing with her and then the aftermath of what I saw when I went to go a couple of days after the storm. But my family owned that house since it was built in the early 70s until it was torn down after what was left after the storm in 2011.
And I think a lot of people had that same sort of experience, those who were impacted by this. So that day, most Alabamians know, was a historic day. So there were 62 tornadoes in the state, all right? And there's a big, long red stripe in there that goes right through Pleasant Grove, just north of Hueytown. And for folks who lived in Pleasant Grove, I don't know if you can see this at home, but there is actually still a scar path. So I drew where the damage is, but if you look right here, do you see where it's lighter?
I do.
Right in here, that is the scar path from this tornado. And look right in Pleasant Grove, you can see it. The trees are still gone. There's still lighter surface there where everything was just leveled. So that is what an EF4 tornado can do, as you saw firsthand. So I guess talk about that day. You mentioned your family being there, and what did you think, I guess, that morning? Were you following the weather? How did that start for you?
We've always followed weather, but that day, as you know, the warnings were especially concerning. It started in Pleasant Grove. With that morning, my mom, I guess there was maybe a storm that morning that hit like Trussville or Clay north of Birmingham. There was a smaller storm, and my mom lost power that morning. So she was in Pleasant Grove all day without power. So she was really depending on me. I lived in Clear at the time. My dad lived in Pell City at the time, and we were watching the weather and keeping her up to date of what was going on. And then when everything started in Tuscaloosa, I I lived in Clear, as I said. So my family, we started preparing in case it came towards Calera, getting our bathroom ready with everything we needed in case we needed to get in there. And I and my dad both called my mom and were like, "Hey, look, this storm's in Tuscaloosa. I know you're sitting in the living room right now, but you probably need to go on and go downstairs in the basement and be prepared to shelter because it's coming that way. We'll keep you up to date of what was going on." And then once it said it was coming directly into Pleasant Grove, at that point in time we couldn't get in touch with her anymore. And it was quite a while before we were ever able to get through. And my dad eventually that evening, by some miracle, got her cell phone to go through, and it was probably about 45 minutes after the storm hit. And we were able to get in touch with her. We knew her house had been hit, we knew that she was trapped, and we were actually able to get on the phone a neighbor. And doing what you do, you know how rare that is to get any kind of cell service to work
Yeah,
after a storm. And so
yeah.
the fact that we were able to get through to her was definitely a miracle.
That was a big problem too because people forget 2011, depending on how old you are, may or may not seem like a long time ago, but social media wasn't a big thing. So you didn't have initial pictures. You didn't know right away. I know I was in Starkville at the time, not far from Tuscaloosa, and we went over there the next day. Had no idea that the magnitude of it. So you got loved ones. There's no cell service. Cell towers were knocked out everywhere. There's no power. That was a very scary time. But you guys prepared. You probably didn't prepare for this. Here's a stat for you. This tornado track, and some people may or may not know this. This is the same storm that went through Tuscaloosa, the same tornado track. And you can see in the corner of the screen right there where it went through Tuscaloosa. it did EF4 damage in Pleasant Grove. And back just to the west of Pleasant Grove, it was a little weaker storm. It ramped up right over basically the west side of Pleasant Grove before it went through. Estimated winds up to 190 miles an hour with that, which, to give you an idea of 190 mile an hour winds, one of the strongest landfalling hurricanes in the U.S. haven't hit 190 mile an hour winds at landfall. So that is a strong tornado, and certainly did a lot of damage. So when did you finally get in touch with her?
I wasn't able to speak with her until much later in the evening. Um, my dad, like I said, was able to get in touch with a neighbor. They had actually gone down to her house, couldn't tell if she was there or not there, so they thought that maybe she had come to my house earlier in the day and was at my house because they couldn't tell whether she was there or not there. And so they had already started trying to get out of the street. They went back for her. My dad was able to explain to them she was in a downstairs bathroom. They went through the garage and they were able to get her out that way. That was several hours after the storm. My dad went with to Pell City like I said, he lived in Pell City. So my dad, I had a 3-year-old at the time, so I couldn't get out and do this stuff. So my dad went and helped her, and they would not let him into Pleasant Grove past where the Piggly Wiggly was, which is not far into Pleasant Grove. He was able to park his vehicle, get on he had like a side-by-side, get on his four-wheeler, drive to where her house was, and they had taken probably 3 or 4 hours just to get, which normally is maybe a 5 to 7 minute drive from where she lived and to where this Piggly Wiggly was. Took them hours. My mom had scleroderma, which is an autoimmune type disease, and so she had to get out, go over all this debris up her street on foot because they couldn't get the truck down there to the end of the road to get in the back of this truck to ride with a bunch of other neighbors to Pleasant Grove, to the Piggly Wiggly at the other side of Pleasant Grove, where they sort of had that as the meeting place where people could come and catch up with their loved ones. And then we had
So
a
they,
relative that lived right behind there, so she stayed there.
so they actually had like that was what you resorted to, is just coming together in a random place to try to find who did okay?
Yeah. My dad was able to get on his four-wheeler because my mom was on like certain medication and stuff that she wasn't able to get out, obviously, when they were trying to get out right after the storm. So my dad was able to get there probably 10 o'clock that night, drove down, and was able to get some of her meds and some of the stuff that she needed and get it out of the house and take it to her so she would have it.
Is this just you and her?
That's me and my mom. Yeah.
Very sweet. So that fireplace
Yeah.
that's back there, is that the same one that is right here?
It is.
Wow.
That's that fireplace.
So just to give an idea, obviously there's behind there is a full fireplace, chimney. Is that the living room?
It is the living room. It's the right side of the house. So that where you see on the right side of your screen, that's where the front wall of the house was.
Wow. Completely gone. And I mean, amazing the things that kind of go untouched. It looks like, well, I don't know if they were there before, but there's some birdhouses on that
They were
mantle.
there before.
And those don't move, yet you have the entire roof
Right.
taken off.
It's crazy to me. And that one window is destroyed and the other window wasn't broken.
So why the spray paint here on the deck? What did that signify?
There were a lot of teams coming around there. So the storm happened on Thursday. We were not able to get in on Friday. That was the day that the law enforcement was still going around with cadaver dogs looking for houses where individuals had passed in the storm. And so they would not let anybody in on Friday. We were not able to get there until Saturday morning. And what they were telling us to do at the time, because many mailboxes were gone, you couldn't see what what the address was of the house. So they encouraged everyone to spray paint the address on the house for anytime law enforcement came around. They were trying to make sure everyone was safe. You had a lot of insurance adjusters coming in and out at the time, and they had no way of knowing what the address was or what the home was they were looking for. So they had you spray your address. Plus, that was also a sign of somebody's been here and we're okay. This address has already been checked.
So that kind of like gave me, when I first was looking through these, when you sent them to me, that kind of gave me like chills in a sense that that kind of signified like what was left. Like you didn't, there wasn't even a mailbox. You didn't know the address. I tried to look up the road that this house was on, and I think it was called Fan Road, and I couldn't find it. But
So it was the Fan Road area. That was what they called the area that it was in, but this was specifically 11th Street. So if you going into the Fan Road area, you would turn onto 12th Court, and then it turns into 11th Street, which is a dead end. There were a number of the tornado deaths that day in Pleasant Grove, one street before this street and one street after this street. But there were thankfully none on this actual street.
yeah, and I look at these pictures here, and we'll go through a couple more. If
Sure.
you'd have showed me these and said that, now, she wrote it out in the house.
She was in the basement.
So I can tell you right there, that probably saved your life because clearly what's in the upper levels is gone. And, we
Right.
stress this, and it sounds just like over and over and over when we say, get to your safe place. But that made the difference in this,
It did.
in my opinion, because any of this could have fallen into the house, hit somebody who's in there. I mean, this is a true representation of what
You
these.
can see where the power lines were, like
Wow.
the part of the power lines came into where that used to be my bedroom growing up. Like it's inside the house.
I didn't realize those were power lines, but now that you say it, incredible.
Yeah.
So, and these are some more pictures from. So, what is this? Is this the road where the mailboxes were, the street that she lived off of?
That's 11th Street. So that was when I was walking down that morning, the Saturday after the storm. That was my first view. That's my dad and some friends of ours. Those people that you see on the street. We had to park at the top of the road. It's a short road, and then there's like a cul-de-sac and a turn, and then it comes down to this, and then it's a dead end. So that the left of the screen, you can see a little bit of our house. Kind of if you look up to the left of where the
Yeah.
people are, that's our house. But that was the first view of the street that I had coming down that Saturday morning.
Yeah, right here.
Yes.
You can see the corner of it. And just this gives kind of the scope of the widespread. I mean, this wasn't concentrated to, one side of the street or one area. I mean, this is, the whole road. And again, just to look at that house and see that somebody was able to survive is really, really good to see. So how did that, and I don't know if you can speak for her, but how did that change, I guess, her perspective on things moving forward with respect to these storms?
Yeah, if you see the garage doors on the left, if you go in through the garage, we had built a room down in the basement. It was kind of like the hangout room, and there was a bathroom, and that's where she was. All she ever talked about what she could see. I mean, she heard the sounds, the freight trains, then followed by the quiet, but she saw like the roof shift because the foundation shifted on the home, obviously, when the wind hit it. But she saw the roof shift, and she saw water coming in. And she did not know when she came out of that bathroom what she was coming out to. But as you can tell, we were very fortunate that the structure, even though it was a loss, the structure was somewhat in place there with the basement. It's not like some of the houses around us and that were just complete rubble. So I think that we were very fortunate in that sense. But as far as after that, she never really talked about it. She told me a little bit about what I just said to you, but she actually passed in April of 2018. And from the storm until then, in those 7 years, she never really talked a whole lot about it. But our whole family, from that point, anytime you hear the threat of storms, we're taking it very seriously, and she did too.
Yeah, it can be tough to put that into words, an experience like that a lot of people don't have, especially to this magnitude. So But that just like everything you just explained there kind of echoes the importance of making sure you take one. And you know what? 90% of the time, you'll probably be okay. Maybe even higher than that. But that's why we stress: is it worth it? Because this is the alternative. You know, you stay up there and something bad can happen. And with this tornado alone, there were 65 fatalities spanning 2 counties. So we know it was deadly. Was a house ever rebuilt? How did that rebuild process go?
So we never rebuilt it. We cleared the lot down to the foundation, just because it was just there's. I mean, the house was a complete loss. I kept the property until a few years ago, and then I sold the lot to someone that was going to rebuild on it. The lot I haven't been there in a couple of years. I hate to say, um, it's just it's still too raw, honestly, all these years later to go there. And so I don't know if they've ever started building or not.
I would have a hard time, I think, doing that as well because you had one image of it that was your mom's. It was your childhood. It was that room that you said, and then just looking here, Meredith, like the fact that I can see on this map all these years later, the Earth is still scarred from this. It probably would not look at all like you remembered it back in those days, which is
Yeah.
hard, shocking, and hard to wrap your mind around for
Yeah, I
sure.
took my mom there on the 1 year anniversary of the tornado. Um, and then I would visit there every year just about. And then my dad and I went there on the 10 year anniversary. And we dug up the flower bulbs that I have planted in my yard now. And my dad planted some in his yard, and my mom's best friend planted some in her yard. So I don't know that I've been back there in probably 2 or 3 years now.
I think I might actually have those pictures you sent me, but the fact that you were able to save a couple things, I think, is really, really, it's cool and it's kind of ominous at the same time because those were things that can remind you of it. But like, how do you feel about? I've seen your front yard. I know the bird bath, the stones.
Yeah.
What does that like mean to you?
To me, it's a memory of my childhood. I always that song by Miranda Lambert, "The House That Built Me." That sort of makes me think of this house. It's the house that built me. So those are some of the flowers that I replanted, and they haven't started blooming yet. The ones down the side of my house actually have a lot of bulbs on them now. The daffodils bloomed. Those are just things that were very. There's the angel and some of the stones. Yep. So those are some of the stones from that fireplace that my mom had wanted, and she had them at her house that she moved into, and then when I passed, they came to my house. So it's a memory of just the childhood and the memories that we had in that house, things that were very important to my mom. Losing my mom in 2018, I see these things, and it's good memories of her. She loved those flowers every year. Their irises every year when they bloomed. It was something that was so special to her. So the fact that I can still have those, even though we lost so much, is something special.
Yeah, I mean, just hearing your like take of it, and I'm just getting this secondhand. We talked a little bit before about this day, but I can tell it was very impactful to you and to your family. So, what would you say, to people, I guess, going forward? If you had any advice, because as a meteorologist, I can tell you what happens, but I've never had to live through one. I've been close, but that was storm chasing, so I was being the dummy chasing it. But for people,
You did it on purpose.
I did do it on purpose. I tried to be in a safe spot. One particular time, I got a little too close, but um, I've never been through something like this. I haven't had a family member go through this, thank goodness. But like, what would you tell them and pass along if you could say, one thing?
Take it serious. As you said, 90 or maybe more percent of the time you'll be fine, because I mean it's easy all these times as a mom, as I'm like, oh my god, they canceled school. So it's easy to get annoyed that they canceled school and you have to be at home, and you have to um, take the day sometimes off of work and out of life when you have busy things going on. For then, thankfully, just like these last storms that came through where we live, thankfully our area, it was very calm. But just down the street in Calera, where I used to live, and some other places, they had tornadoes. Um, so you just never know. It could end up being the day that you're just annoyed because you've had to take off work and your kids are out of school and you have to shelter in place. But it could also be the day that this storm happens. And like I had said earlier, when we talked to my mom, she was sitting in that living room where that fireplace is, where that brick wall went down, or the stone wall. She was sitting in that couch right there where all of that happened until probably the storm was in Tuscaloosa. And we told her, all right, you need to go on and go downstairs. The path it's on says it's coming that way. We'll keep you going. And she's like, she was obsessed with drinking sweet tea. So she's like, well, hold on, let me fix some sweet tea. And
Of
she had a
course.
dog. Let me get the dog and get my sweet tea and I'll go on downstairs and y'all just let me know what's going on. Um, and that saved her life. So, it could have not come through there, but on this one time it did. And she was cautious and went downstairs and she made it out.
I really appreciate you sharing your story. I've not really talked to anyone kind of directly involved with this. I know a lot of people. I know what happened that day as a weather guy. But just to hear it gives perspective. That helps us too when we're covering this stuff. Obviously we don't wish for a severe weather day, but we just try to echo this from, what I hear from people like you, from even secondhand or people who survive through it. It's always very good information to pass along, and hopefully that other people will take note. And also, hopefully, we don't have another day like this. This is a case study now. This day,
Right.
never been parameters like this before or since. So,
I lived in Pleasant Grove during the 1998 tornado too.
yeah. So we were just looking at we passed the anniversary of that. That was April 8th, I believe, of '98. How far was it? It was a little bit further north, wasn't it? Or
It happened. So I was thinking about this. I can't remember if I believe I was at church if not, if I was either at church or I was at school at dance team practice. I can't remember because that was in 1998. I was a senior in high school. So I just remember sheltering in place because the storm was coming and they made us shelter in place where I was worried at the school or at the church. But either way, where the path went through was about 10-ish minutes from where we were.
wow. Do you remember much of that? I assume was your house okay in that particular instance?
It was because it went more down through Sylvian Springs and Oak Grove and down that path a little further down. I had friends that lived in Sylvian Springs. Their side of the street was untouched. Across the street from them, demolished, looked like a war zone. Um, so I remember that. I don't remember it as well as obviously the 2011 tornado because I was much younger and it didn't hit me personally as close. But I remember I had friends that lost things. There were people I went to school with, went to church with, that had damage. But I just remember going to Sylvan Springs to my friend's house, and her house was fine, and then like across the street was nothing.
Yeah, and that's
And
hard to
so
wrap
that
your mouth.
is
That's hard
hard.
enough to think about as like just a general, somebody who lives there. But then from a weather perspective, even it's how fickle that is. How wide is it? Does it go to this side of the street? Does it miss you by this much? I mean, it truly is a fascinating, and we're still learning about these things. We're
Right,
trying to get better at tracking them, but that's why we just say be smart, be
right.
safe.
Well, we appreciate it for sure.
Well, thanks for talking with me.
Yeah, right.
This was awesome. I'm gonna go ahead and stop this. Well, actually, is there anything else you want to add about it? I
No,
thought you nailed it. I mean, absolutely nailed it.
I'm
So
I'm happy to come on anytime. It's not.